We are live.
We're live, perfect. Hola and welcome, ladies, gents, and my non-binary friends, to our session, bringing your authentic self to work to the value of inclusion in gaming. My name is Francisca Phillips, and my pronouns are she, ella, and I lead the efforts of diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, and so many other things at Jam City. I am very proud today and very honored to have a very special guest. He has been a wonderful moderator for us for the previous sessions. And now it's his time to tell us a little bit more about himself. So, Andrew, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about your role in the company and one thing that you love the most about what you do?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew. If you have been a part of the last two sessions, you are probably tired of my voice by now. But I am so excited to be a part of this session. I've really looked forward to it all week. I love talking with Fran in our regular days, but now on this platform, it's just so meaningful. I go by he, him pronouns. My role here at Jam City is a recruiting partnerships and ops associate. And essentially what that is I get the chance to work on a couple of different initiatives in the company that ultimately help our recruitment efforts. That consists of our internship program, which shameless plug, is year round. So we'll have more internships all throughout the year. And then I also get to work with university and colleges to help recruit from some of the best schools, from some of the most, I think, the strongest programs and just overall great student bases. And overall get to help design a great experience for students when they do join the team here at Jam City. When I'm not working on early career programming, I also get the chance to also help a little bit out with figuring out new ways for us to partner with different nonprofits or companies outside of Jam City to help improve the diversity and inclusion of our teams. That consists of great partners like GGP, other great partners that we've worked with in the past and that we'll continue to work with in the future. In terms of one of my favorite things about my role, is I get to talk to students, like I mentioned, which is basically like constantly getting this wave of just like passion and excitement put on you every single day. I talk to students all hours of my workday, and every single time it's a different student with a different background, whether it's in production or gaming or marketing. But one thing is consistent across all of them, and that's their passion for breaking into an industry and the curiosity and the excitement that they have for games. And that it's just like constantly being plugged into like an electricity socket and just having energy on you at constant times of your workday. So I really enjoy that. And that's probably my favorite part about it is I just don't feel like there's never a moment in my day that I don't have enough energy and passion to be living off of.
Oh, thank you. I felt that energy already.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kick off this session by reading a quote that I actually used at our jam session internally this week, because I just think it's a great way of us grounding the conversation on what we're going to be talking about. And I don't want to butcher it, so I'm going to go ahead and read it. It is, being authentic means coming from a real place from within. It is when our actions and our words are congruent with our beliefs and our values. It is being ourselves, not an imitation of what we think we should be or have been told we should be. There is no should in authentic. And I really like that because for me, it's kind of like samurai says, right? What authenticity is crucial. Why is it crucial, important, not only at work, but also in our daily lives? So I would love to start by asking you, what does it mean to you when someone says authentic self?
I love that quote because it touched on the word values. And the more that I've thought about this quote and this question, the more I've thought about, am I living my values out loud? And when I think about that question, it's like, well, that's authenticity right there. So I think of, and I've said this a few times during Pride Month, for me, authenticity, it's being unapologetically myself. When I walk into a conference room and I'm meeting with people of all different levels in the company, or when I walk, to my desk and I'm in a co-working space, or when I see my friends, it's living life feeling like I'm unapologetically myself. I could speak what I want to say no matter what environment that I'm in. I could think and contribute ideas no matter who I'm speaking to. I don't feel the need to feel like I have to, shelter myself in any way or shelter my ideas and thoughts. And if you can live authentically and work authentically, it ultimately just leads to I think overall just happiness and feeling like you're a part of something as well too. So to go back to the question, for me, living authentically means unapologetically myself. It means I can contribute, I can say what I want to say, I can use whatever expressions I want to use. I'm tuned in with myself and my values, and I live them out loud through my choices and what I want to say and how I say it as well too.
I love that, because that not only helps you be who you are and you're not masking or anything, like, you know, you don't have that heavy weight on top of you of having to be different people for different audiences. And also, I think that you set an example for everybody else at Jam City and when you hang out with your friends or with your family members, because you're you. And a lot of people have a hard time being themselves, and they don't know exactly how to be themselves. Do they go here or there? So I think it's really important for us to do actually what we preach, right? So talking about your career specifically, did you immediately recognize that you had skills that would be good for the gaming industry, or did you have to close some gaps before you were able to get into the gaming industry?
Definitely the latter. I was not in any way, like some of the speakers from today, in any way did I pursue to go into games in my career, but I'm very, very happy to be here. In terms of the skills that I feel like I had, I think it took a while to build a lot of the skills that I have now that are relevant for gaming. Skills like knowing how to, you know, go into a room and speak to a room full of artists and game designers and engineers. There's no way I would have been able to do that 6-7 years ago when I had no idea the different positions in gaming, or being able to help recruit for a brand new unreleased title that no one knows about, but I have to go out and find 3D artists and marketers for this unannounced title, and all I can say about it is that it's unannounced. Like things like that, it's you don't have those skills, I feel, until you're in it, and until I feel like you're learning with your team and you're asking a ton of questions. So all of the experience that I feel that is relevant to gaming that I have now, I've had to learn it in gaming or a few years before in roles that I worked in tech. In terms of some of the skills that I feel that I did have early on, were skills around, like, whether it's, you know, public speaking, or skills like communication, or skills like organization. I was pretty organized in school. I was pretty detail driven in customer service roles that I worked in the past too. And I think these are all skills that people often don't think about when they're, you know, finding a new industry to work in, and they don't think that it's transferable, but they absolutely are. So after kind of knowing these strengths that I had, I said, well, look, I don't know about game art, I don't know not about game design, but I do know how to ask the right questions, and I do know how to put somebody on the spot and get the answers that I need to get to then take a test on game design or take a test on game art, at least to get a C+ on it. But I would say I knew that I had certain skills of communication, and I could bring them into game design, or I could bring them into, the games industry. So I in no way, shape, or form did I ever feel at one point, I have all the skills that I need to go into game development, I'm going to go into work into game development. It was quite the opposite of that.
Great. No, that's a great message for our audience. So don't think that you have to have every single thing. And I think that you hit it right on the very important thing that you mentioned earlier, is to follow your curiosity, asking questions, and having the passion for something, because you can bring a lot of skills that maybe other people may not even know about, right? And I really enjoy, that's one of the things I really enjoy by working at Jam City, that I come from not the gaming industry. I come from a long journey and adventure in hospitality for 16 years, cruising industry. And I kind of like, oh my goodness, I'm 45 years old. I know nothing about games, but I play them. But I'm passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The company's great, and let's go for it. And people just embrace that, and we ask questions, ask away. It's really important.
And might I say, you crush at what you do, Fran. You're amazing. So,
yay. So talking about, going back to the quote, right, when we talked about the values, what are some of your personal values that align with being in the game industry?
A couple of them. Right off the bat, creativity. I am naturally like a creative person. A lot of my personal hobbies outside of work are, include art, include music, dance. I grew up in a creative home where my family, they were all doing creative things in one way or another. So creativity has always been a big thing for me. Coming into tech a few years ago, yes, there was creativity, there was elements of design, but there isn't anything like working in a game studio where you're surrounded by concept art on the walls. You're surrounded by code that's helping build these games, or there's consoles plugged in, or people are on their phones playing games and then they're doing testing on their games. Like things like that, when you're in an environment like that, you can't help but feel inspired, and you can't help but feel like a kid in a candy shop where there's literally so much going on, and there's so much just it's almost like being in Disneyland where there's just like characters all around you in one way and development happening. So creativity was a big value of mine and something that I wanted to have in the industry that I went into, and gaming absolutely has that. After that, I would say like teamwork and collaboration is a big thing for me. I was the kid who raised their hand in school for like projects, and I would love to go and work with different teams and do different group projects. And I feel like game development is that. You have different positions, you have different teams, but ultimately you're working on one end goal, which is to ship a game or a product to a variety of players. I love that about the industry. And that's a personal value of mine that I feel like it's comes alive in the industry, just being in the nature of a development space as well too. Yeah, I mean that, and then also just for me, I've always been very like user focused in the sense that I love talking about things like whether it's user like sentiment or player focus is what we call it here at Jam City, and just kind of player experience. I love companies that value like customer feedback and actually take a moment to step back and use that feedback to better the products or the services. I've always worked for companies that put a lot of prioritization on that, and I would say Jam City is right there along that list. So for me, the games industry, at least the best brands, take a time to listen to their players. They engage with their players through like community forums or whatever the case is, and I love that. I think that's a personal value of mine, is when you're really closely connected to your users. And I think gaming absolutely has that. It's different, right? It's traditional media like film and TV. There isn't this bridge between the viewer and the network or the production company. Whereas gaming, there's this bridge between players and the publisher and the community manager. We're constantly connected to players. And I love that. I think that's a really interesting part about our industry too.
Definitely. And within your role, you have internal and external customers, because at the end of the day, the hiring managers are asking you for something specific, and your potential candidates are also asking you for something else. So that's really good how you can bring in your experience to that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there are two things that ultimately lead to employees feeling engaged. And the most basic one is to our needs need to be satisfied, right? And the most advanced one is feeling that we belong in a much bigger role or scope. What are some of the things that you get out of working in the gaming industry that surprised you, that you're like, wow, I really like this?
Mm-hmm. I think it's the sense of community. I didn't expect that, and I was very nervous coming into the gaming industry without a gaming background. I was afraid of showing up on day one and somebody asking me a question about a console or a PC game, or somebody asking me what my player code was, or what it was. And me looking at them and saying, I have no idea what that is. No, I've never used, Twitch or whatever the case is, right? Things like that. I was so afraid of that. And I quickly realized that wasn't the case, at least at any of the studios that I've worked at. There was a sense of community, and there was a sense of willingness to teach people who didn't know about game development what game development was. And that was surprising to me, because I always was afraid of going to I've been to a lot of conferences growing up, like Comic-Con and E3 and all that stuff, but I was afraid of coming into groups that I had no idea about their personal interests or their likes or dislikes or whatnot. So I was scared of that. And I found the opposite of that. At every gaming company that I've worked at, especially at Jam City, there isn't this sense of, I don't want to say entitlement, or the sense of cliqueness. It's opposite. It's community. It's very, come on in, we'll teach you what you want to know. There's no wrong question. You can ask as many questions as you want. And that to me was very comforting, coming from a non-gaming background. So that definitely surprised me in the sense of belonging. And then also I would say how there's games for everyone. There isn't just games for your first person shooters. There isn't just RPGs. There's so many different types of games. And growing up, I loved Kingdom Hearts. I loved Disney. And I didn't know that it was acceptable at this age to say no, Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy and RPG are still my favorite types of games. And I can absolutely say that now. And everyone's like, oh, yes, love those too. And it's really accepting, and it feels great. And now being on this end, talking to students, they're creating games nowadays that are completely different than what they were 10, 15 years ago. There's games being made now about, the neighborhoods that we grew up in. There's games being made about local community cultures that are now turning into massive successful games. So I find that part so amazing about our industry, is that we're storytellers in what we do, but we are creating stories for every single different type of player or audience member. There's something for everyone. There's different type of gameplay, there's different type of stories, characters, all that. So long-winded answer to say that I feel like our industry has a lot of openness and opportunity for no matter where you come from or what it is that you're interested in.
Yeah, no, I second that definitely. For me, I think that one of the biggest surprises was that I was a player. I never considered myself a player. I have two older kids. They've played their whole lives all these games and on their PC and their consoles and the whole thing. And I never considered myself a gamer, but I've always been playing video games on my little phone or the iPad. And I'm like, ooh, I'm a player and I have a gaming chair. So, hey, I think I qualify.
You do. We're going to get you on Twitch, Fran. We're going to get you streaming.
I know that. And that's the funny thing. So having these conversations with like he's a teenager, he's 19, and my oldest one, asking them, how do you use Steam? What is Steam? What is Twitch? I don't know, like so many other things. I'm playing Pokemon with them also. It kind of like has brought us together with the girlfriends and the wives and the grandkids are too small, but yeah, definitely it's a great culture. Definitely.
Yeah.
Really, really cool. So I would love to hear a story from you of what happened on the day that you realized, wow, this is where I belong at Jam City. Like you realized it and you said, yeah, I'm loving this.
Mm-hmm. Specifically to Jam City, it was maybe in my first month. And I feel like I talk about this all the time, which was the first month of me being on the team was the month that we decided we're going to launch this like internship program, and we were going to work with a lot of like cross-functional partners to put this thing together. And on my first few weeks here, I had one of the leaders in my immediate part of the business tell me like, look, we absolutely, trust you. We feel that you have the thought process and the curiosity to make this successful. Like, run with it, and we'll support what it is that you want to do. And I had never heard that ever in my career to that extent. Like, I had heard a part of it, right? I had heard like, yes, I support you. Whatever you need, let me know. Mm-hmm. But this felt very authentic, and it felt true, and it felt like, okay, well, now I can go. And I think that a great intern experience means, roundtables with different employees in the company. I think it means, this or that, and I could puzzle it, and I can go out and do my own industry research and come back and know that I have a team that supports me. I know that I have a team that's willing to hear about the ideas that I have and lets me act on them. And that was the first time ever where I had that much buy-in and that much support from a team that I had really just begun to work with. So in those first few months of being in the company, they went by so fast because I was working on things that I cared about, and I was working on projects that I was being supported on. So to this day, whenever somebody asks me about the culture of the company or my own experience, I always say that, go to a place or be somewhere where your ideas are acted on and celebrated. And I feel like that's what creates a sense of belonging for a lot of people, for me, for sure. So I would say the first few months of being on the team here, and to this day, a year and some months later, it very much feels like that. It feels like if I hear of something that's being done outside of Jam City that I know is really amazing and that we should do, it's as easy as me pitching it, and I'll be encouraged to act on that.
I love hearing that, because it's to your point, it's not only having a voice, but also making sure that voice is heard. Exactly. And you're empowered to act on what your opinions are, and that you're valued for what you're bringing to the table. That's really important.
So many teams and companies stop at the listening stage, was what I've heard and I've experienced, where you listen to whether it's employees or customers or whatever, and they stop, they listen, they take in, they record the input, but they don't do much with that. There isn't much action or follow-up that comes with that, and that's not the experience that I've had here on the team here. And I would say that's really where inclusion for me takes that next level, is when you're taking action and you're including people in the decision-making process of the action that you want to take, and the best way to go about things. So yeah.
Love it. what do you think that companies can do in the gaming industry to leverage the intersectionality of our employees? You know, you've heard that representation matters. If you can see it, you can be it. But how is it that you think, because I think a lot of the times we focus, and I think we all fall into this. We say it's Pride Month and we're only focusing on one dimension of people. But people are so many other things, right? We have fathers, we have daughters, we have so many other things in that group. And we need to celebrate them also like every single day of the year, not only during June. So how do you think that some companies in the gaming industry can leverage that intersectionality that employees bring to the table?
There's a couple of different things. I mean, one, you have to really take a look inward into your company or into your team and ask yourself, do I create an environment that is safe for people to share the other parts of their identity? If you don't think about that thoroughly, you're going to quickly discover that the environment that you probably have isn't the safest in the sense that an employee feels comfortable bringing every part of their identity. I'm gay, I'm Latino, whatever part of your identity it is. Some people may hold back on certain one of them. So you have to ask yourself, have I done the work internally to make this a safe space? If not, what partner can I seek out to help me make this a safe space? Two, I think you have to give a platform for people to share their stories. One of the things that you did that is so amazing that you've done with Jam City, Fran, is our Jam Talks. And you've set up a platform where you've invited employees to come in and share their stories around their identities or share their stories around their experiences as whatever part of their identity they want to share. And that is what I mean when I say give a platform for the voices to be heard and for the stories to be shared. Because when you give these platforms and you make a safe space, people more often than not love to share what they know and who they are. And I think that when you have that platform, like for example, me, and I feel safe on the Jam Talk earlier this week, I quickly shared, I'm gay, I'm a Latino, this is who I am. And I felt safe and I felt like I was open to sharing any other part of my identity that I was asked about. So I think those two are the most important things. Is your company, is there a platform for people to share their stories? And is there a safe space for people to want to share that? And then three, and probably lastly, you have to celebrate and acknowledge intersectionality, because if you don't, people will often silo to just one part of their identities. You have to bring, if your company has like employee resource groups, or if the industry, has all these different communities of different identities, you have to make it a point to work together as well too. And you have to bring community and bring people together. At previous companies that I've worked at, we've done like intersectionality, like weeks where we invite like our Latinx ERG and our LGBTQI ERG to come together and celebrate something together. So you have to make it a point, and people, once you put them at an intersection, will often find that comfort to share other parts of their identities.
Yeah. And definitely being genuine so we can create that trust and that psychological safety, to your point. So that way employees feel that they can be themselves and talk about their backgrounds. Yeah. Before I go to my next question, we have a question from the audience, if you don't mind. What is more important, grades in classes, portfolio work, or extracurriculars or clubs in evaluating an intern candidate? How can I prepare for an intern interview? That's a great question.
I would say more than anything, I'll try to make this one quick, portfolio work and actual experience that you have hands-on is super important. We've talked about passion projects throughout the afternoon today. Anything that you can do to demonstrate your actual connection to the work that you're applying for if it's game design or game art, a portfolio that shows these two things, whether it's through your coursework, through personal projects or whatnot. I would say that's top of mind, and more often than not will get a recruiter's attention a little bit quicker than like a GPA or extracurricular activities that you've listed out on your resume. Any extracurricular activities are super important too, especially if they're within game clubs or game organizations. Prepare for intern interviews. Definitely research the publisher, research the studio that you're applying for, play a few of their games, and in interviews, feel free to bring up some of these titles and just your excitement for a few titles.
Perfect. So to the audience member that submitted this question, now make sure you apply for our fall internship program.
Yeah. Applications opening next month.
Hey, yes, of course. So you don't have to give me names with the question, but in general, who do you think are some of the happiest individuals you know at work, and why do you think that they're so fulfilled?
That's a great question. I'm like smiling thinking about these specific people too. And I think for this question, I'll also use not just people at Jam City, but people in my career who I've seen be really happy at what they do.
Yeah.
I think it's the right balance of autonomy and direction for employees that are really the happiest. I think, and people in their roles, they want to feel like they're impacting something. They want to feel like they have a purpose in what they do. So I think if you strike this right balance of giving people objectives and direction and values, but then you get out of their way because you hired great people and you just say, I'm going to get out of your way and I'm going to let you do what you do best. People often more than not have this sense of fulfillment that they feel. And that shows, that comes across when they work, that comes across in their assignments and their projects as well too. So I've worked for great leaders that have always said, things to me like, look, we hire smart people because we want them to tell us what to do, not the other way around. And that speaks volumes to me. And I always make it a point, if I'm ever leading a team or working on a team, to let people know that I trust you and your skill set from day one. And I know that, and I know that, you're going to be great at what you do from day one. So I'm going to give you an objective. I'm going to give you a strategy, but I'm going to let you run with it. So I will say that's number one, is the right balance between autonomy and direction. And then number two, to what you do, Fran, DE&I is so important because it allows people to be their authentic selves in what they do. And if you could be successful at that, at creating an environment where people feel that they can bring themselves to work and they could talk about their personal lives, they could talk about, the things that they do with their family or their partners or the personal projects that they're taking on or their hobbies, people are going to want to come to work because they're going to build authentic relationships and they're going to build trust with their coworkers as well too. So that's probably another thing too. And then, people just also have to, it's hard, but finding something that you care about in your work is so important because it's what keeps you focused and what keeps you motivated. So I would say that's probably the third thing, is the people that I've seen that are the happiest are ones that have been, spent time finding what they want in their careers, and they've found it, and now they're in love with what they do.
Yeah, I love that answer. Can you share a couple of examples of maybe employees who were able to have a significant impact, maybe or in a development of a game, because they were allowed to bring their authentic self to work?
Yes, of course. There's a couple of things that I can think about. I mean, I don't have I haven't had too much exposure with our direct game development teams here at Jam City, but I have in previous studios that I've worked at. And I would say there was one example I remember that always comes to my mind when I think about the value of representation in game design specifically. I was sitting in a sprint meeting in a previous studio, and there were these, game designers to my right, engineers to my left, production managers, and they were all doing a testing session on a mobile game. And I remember that as the game was happening, there was a woman who was I think she was a UX designer on the team, if I remember correctly. And she, during the testing session, quickly kind of I looked over and I saw her begin to kind of tear up, and she was going to say something. And she kind of hesitated for a little bit, but then she stood all the way up and she said, "Hey guys, I don't think that this language that we're using in this part of the game is the most inclusive. It seems very male focused and very male dominated and not very inclusive to women who play our games." And as soon as I heard that, and that was one of my first weeks in gaming in general, I got really excited because I saw authenticity. I saw somebody who has an identity and they were going to speak on it to better the product, which I feel like is right there, diversity and the value of it. And quickly she was, greeted with a lot of questions and well, why not? Why do you think this is what do you recommend instead? Can we do something different? And within a week's time, they had restructured the dialogue that happened in that part of the game to make it more inclusive to women who were playing this game. And it made it, the game is still unreleased, but I remember in that moment, it was just like, I already know that players who play this game are never going to see this story. They're never going to see this moment. They're just going to play a game that doesn't feel as maybe non-inclusive as what it could have been potentially at one point. And that's the power of having a diverse team right there. The power of having someone on your team who will call these things out because of just their awareness of these identities, because they identify with these identities. So that was firsthand me seeing just representation at its best in game design. I think it's the same here at Jam City. Absolutely. We bring in people from different backgrounds. We don't hire just from gaming. We don't hire just from entertainment. We hire from hospitality. We hire from tech. We hire from fintech, from health, or whatever the case is. And we know that that's a strength for us because it's going to bring more insight.
Yeah, definitely. We all bring different perspectives. And I think that is so important, that when we are in meetings, making decisions, we as champions of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and all those things, if it's important to you, where you would want to make sure that you're represented, then you make sure that if you're at that meeting, look around and say something if somebody's not there. So which voices are missing? You need to go ahead and speak up, because that is crucial. And also, when we are designing for a specific group or a specific functionality in our games, let's go ahead and talk to those people that are potentially are going to be using that game and say, hey, are we representing you correctly, right? Mm-hmm. So leveraging everything. But I think all companies can definitely do a really good job at that. And but I think that we can not only put it on the company, we also have to take a responsibility at that for that.
I love what you said around asking, like, who's not at the table already. Like my manager here on the team, Simone, as I go out and as I work with different hiring teams for interns, especially, she'll always, challenge me to ask that question to these teams. Ask them, who's not at your table already? You have people from this school with this major and this degree. Who don't you have that could benefit? And who don't you have that could, make this stronger team and a more diverse team? So
yeah, and we talked about that with Simone about, it's not the culture fit, it's a culture add. Right. Because if it's a fit, then we're bringing more of the same. And when it's a culture add, we're actually bringing in somebody to fill in a gap that we currently don't have, or a perspective that we may have been missing. Great. Yeah, I love the conversation we have with y'all's team, with your team. What advice do you think that you would give your younger self, or maybe somebody in the audience struggling to bring their authentic self to work, or just not even to work, but maybe they're in a stage where they can't even, be themselves around their friends?
Mm-hmm. Most of the work that has to be done around bringing your authentic self to the world is done in here and in here. I've discovered, in my career and in life, you have to come to a point where you're really self-aware of your own likes, your own dislikes, your own values, your own perception, and you have to value that before anything else. And I think once you become to get comfortable with your own voice and your own just strengths, you quickly realize that it doesn't really matter around, what other people have to say around your identity or the way that you move in the world. More than anything, your opinion is of the utmost importance. And I think that's where confidence stems from, is that level of self-awareness and the level of self-love and value. From there, I think it's a matter of practicing authenticity every single day. And of course, gauging the communities that you feel comfortable in, whether it's through a manager relationship with your team, or like your new manager, or your friends at school. You kind of can gauge what communities you feel the most comfortable to practice authenticity in, and this can be little things like, making a remark on a certain show that you really, really love, but you're afraid to talk about in person. For me, growing up, that was Glee. I loved Glee, but I was afraid of telling some of my, cis, friends and heterosexual friends that I loved Glee, but that was the opposite. I told them that and they were like, okay, that's cool. Show us more about Glee. So I found comfort in just slowly beginning to talk more about who I was and my identity, my likes and my dislikes. And then in a workplace, it's a matter of, when you're interviewing for these employers, interview them as much as they interview you. It is absolutely okay to ask employers, how does your company place value on diversity? What does your company do to foster inclusion on teams? Nobody in this day and age should be surprised at these questions, because these have now become the bare minimum for what we look for in our employers. It is important that companies represent on behalf of our identities. So you can ask these questions. So I think that's really important from a professional life standpoint, is you're taking the time to also research and look into businesses and companies and see how they practice inclusion and authenticity and creating safe spaces. So, but more than anything, I honestly think that practicing authenticity, it takes practice. You don't master it one day when you wake up, because it's a roller coaster. You know, you work on it here and there, and you also discover new parts of you every single day. So there's new things to practice every single day. But more than anything, I think it just takes tuning with yourself.
Yeah, yeah. You touched upon briefly of making sure that your values, right, are aligning with the company, whatever is it that you're going to be going. What are some of the ways maybe that our friends in the audience can start like looking if they want to come to Gem City, or maybe it's another company? Hopefully they want to come to work with us. How is it that they would want to do, like what research can they do? What are some of the tools or some resources that maybe you suggested for them to see if maybe this is a good match for their values?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that there's a lot of resources online, right? I think it's probably the quickest way of finding sentiment on, different employers. So I would say, definitely look at the company's website, definitely look at the company's, if it's a third-party review tool that you want to look at, there's a lot of those out there that you can check out. Read up a little bit about the leaders at the company. I've become more and more aware of these things as well too in my career. It's important to understand, what is the leadership structure look at the company? Do these leaders come from different backgrounds in the sense of industries? Are they leaders that have been a part of the company for 15, 20 years? What does growth and development look like at this company? And then after that, I would say, you can use tools like LinkedIn to look up an entire company's employee base. You can go on companies' profiles and look at their like leadership on their LinkedIn. You can look at people in different levels and all that, and you can kind of see a little bit as to what does the employee base look like. And then lastly, I would say that it's, if ever you have a moment to speak to someone from a company that you're interviewing with, whether it's through someone from your network or someone that you reached out to, those are always fantastic as well too, because they can give you a true, authentic insight into the company, into what the company is currently working on, into the priorities of the company as well too. I would say with those, it's just important that you come prepared with questions. You should never do informational conversations not coming prepared with 6 or 7 questions that you really want to get out of the conversation. So definitely leverage people that you know in your network, online resources, third-party websites if you want to, and then just, of course, online research, like I said, and reading more about their values.
Yeah, clearly it's extremely important, because we spend so much time at work. We have to believe in what we do and the products that your company has. So
Right.
definitely do that homework. That's extremely important. Be picky, because we spend a lot of time at work, and you need to make sure that you feel that connection with the company. And sometimes it takes time to build up that, right? Because you're going to be making new friends. You may not know people there. But to your point, do your research. I remember that while I was interviewing with Gem City, I learned that y'all were going to be in one of these sessions, sort of like similar to this. I signed up. It was like 9:00 at night here in Florida, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. But the panel was like so fun, and I got to meet you and Simone, and there were 2 other people. I can't remember who they were. I think it was Joram and Michael. And I learned so much about the company, and I got to interact with them through the chat. And like I was already, part of the group. But that just gives you a little bit like an extra connection with the potential company that, to your point, we as candidates also interview in that company to see if they're going to be a good fit for us.
Mm-hmm. And that absolutely, I remember you telling me that on your first day. I was like, oh my goodness, we made the right choice. She was already doing her research. She had joined events. She knew who we were. Fran is the one.
So I know that we only have 5 minutes, but I would love to get your take. And this is like the unscripted part of our our interview is now during Pride Month. I know that it's extremely important to celebrate, to show the support. What are your thoughts with what people are talking about, good or bad, or pros or cons of companies just putting their logos out there and a ton of merchandise, and then not backing this up with certain things, or some other people backing them up, but they don't want to put statements out there because they want to do the work internally? what are your thoughts as an individual on what companies are doing?
It's such a great question because I walk into Target every few days because I love Target. And every single time I go into Target, I'm bombarded during Pride Month with Pride merch right away. As soon as you walk in, shirts, decor, whatever it is. And more often than not, I do feel a sense of like, oh, awesome, Pride Month. But then at some point, I feel like, okay, is this being marketed towards me? Is this the intention of this for like a consumer or someone like me to really like spend more money here, kind of thing? I like to think that that's not it. I want to assume positive intent, right? But I do think that companies or businesses or whatnot, you do have to strike a good balance with this because more than anything, you have to value the intention of why you're doing it and how it reads in terms of authenticity. If your intention, if you find yourself in a meeting and someone is pitching Pride product, change the logo because it's going to return business impact, that's not the right intention, in my opinion. Yes, it's good for the business in some way, right? But the intention here should be to take a stance on an issue or the stance on a view on something, right? We support LGBTQI Pride Month because we believe in equality, we believe in education and in celebration of identity, more than we believe in the return on business, right? So I think you have to have a real positive intention when you're doing these things. And I think, absolutely at Jam City, we have that through logo changes or through highlights of our employees or through events like this one. Your intention has to be real. And then two, authenticity is really important too. And I think the way that you have the best authenticity in your messaging is through making sure that it's being reviewed by people who maybe closely identify in that community or who can give you input on that feedback or that specific messaging. So I think it's important if you're in a room full of people that are non-diverse or that don't represent this community, you may run into issues because your messaging may not read as authentic versus having somebody in the room, and this is the value of representation, having somebody in the room who could read it, think about it, identify with their community and see like, does this make sense? And then help you make the decision on that messaging. So your authenticity has to read true and it has to read like it connects with the community that you're trying to get attention of. So intention, authenticity. But I mean, as a gay man in LA where there's marketing all around me for Pride Month this year, I love it personally. Like anywhere I can see my, whether it's the Pride flag or the Ally flag or whatever the case is, like it makes me feel safer because it does feel a little bit like home in a way. But you can easily spot sometimes when companies are not authentic or the intention isn't there. It's just to put a rainbow scheme on a product, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's really, really important. And making sure what the companies stand for. And there's so many awards out there as well that companies don't apply just to get the seal or the award, is because, and I know this from past experiences, because you learn so much as a company applying to these awards that of like even benefits that we had not even thought about maybe in my previous company of offering. But when we read through these, in order to get this seal of the Human Rights Campaign, the Corporate Equality Index, these are some of the things I need to do. You do it not just to get the seal, but you do it because you want to make sure that you're involving the Pride community, you're involving your LGBTI employees, and they're saying, hey, by the way, we don't have these benefits or we don't have X, Y, and Z. And you're like, oh, wow, we didn't even think about it. Because to your point, sometimes it's not our community. And by bringing in their voices specifically, we're going to be able to learn.
That's how you learn, exactly.
Any parting words, messages for our great audience?
No, I mean, this has been a blast. I hope everyone watching today has taken one piece of insight that they can take away. I mean, from this session specifically, it's why representation and inclusion in gaming matters. And I just say thank you to all the people that are doing the work out there, also Fran, yourself included, who are in the industry, making this a more inclusive space to gamers and non-gamers alike, for new people to come into the industry. So it's a lot of work, but through companies like GGP and through heads of D&I like Fran, the work is being done to make our industry that much more inclusive to anyone who wants to join. So
thank you so much for this candid conversation. Thank you to GGP for offering us this platform. Thank you to all the audience members that were able to connect. Ciao. and from Miami. And please, I encourage everyone to live authentically every single day of your life. And happy Pride.
Happy Pride, everybody.
Adios.